Welcome back to part 2 of our wholesale series. In part 1, we talked about what is wholesale, what are the benefits of selling wholesale, some pain points to consider before you start selling wholesale to see if it's even a good fit for your business, and pricing. So if you haven't watched part 1 yet, I will link it up here somewhere and I will also put it down in the description. In this video, I'm going to give you a 7-step process on how to start selling wholesale in your business. We're going to cover everything from pricing to logistics to how to create a line sheet to how to find retailers. This is where we'll talk about trade shows because I know there's a lot of curiosity and confusion about how those work. And as we go, I'm going to be giving some of my own personal experiences in this and giving you some of the pros and cons for the different ways you can do things. But who am I anyway? My name is Tiffany and I am Wow, I can't even say my own name. My name is Tiffany and I am a business and intellectual property attorney, and I work with small businesses and creative businesses to help take the overwhelm and confusion out of the business side of running your business. But first, a necessary evil, a quick disclaimer. I am an attorney, but I am not your attorney. So the things I talk about in this video should not be construed as legal advice, and I always recommend speaking to an attorney who is licensed in your state. So with that, let's dive into wholesale part 2. What do you need to sell wholesale? These are the 7 steps that I recommend you go through before starting the wholesale side of your business. Step 1, pricing. The first thing you want to do is make sure you establish a pricing model for your business. And we talked about this a little bit in part 1, but as a review, your cost is your material costs plus your labor costs plus shipping costs plus overhead and marketing costs, and that altogether is your total cost. For our example, we're using 50% as the markup, which is pretty standard in some industries like apparel, but you do want to see what the norm is for your industry before figuring out what your wholesale markup is going to be. So you'll mark it up 50% to get your wholesale cost, and then mark it up another 50% to get your recommended retail price, or your RRP. Now let's look at an example. Let's say your product has $5 in material cost, $20 in labor, $5 shipping, and $5 in marketing and overhead. This equals $35 if I have done my math right, which is a huge maybe. If we double that, we get our wholesale price of $70. We double that again to get our retail price, or our recommended retail price, of $140. Again, this markup rate varies by industry, so make sure you're checking to see what is the norm in your industry. Step 2, logistics. Put my tea down. This is everything from inventory management to getting your systems in place and all of those sort of things. As I've said before, wholesale is really great to increase your revenues and to increase your reach in the market. But there are some things you do have to consider before starting. Inventory. The goal with wholesale is to sell larger quantities of products at discounted rates. If you make your own goods, whether it's in-house manufacturing or you're making things by hand, you need to make sure that you have the capabilities of handling large orders. If you need to bring on more employees or take on a manufacturer, these are costs that you're going to have to take into account when you're setting your pricing. You also need to consider if you have the space to store larger amounts of product. If you have to get a storage facility in order to store your inventory, that's another thing that's going to eat away at your profits, and you need to take that into account when you set your pricing. Inventory management. This is another area you're going to have to plan for. It's a lot easier when you're just dealing straight with the consumer. You know how many products you have and you know how many orders are coming in. But if you add in this wholesale channel, you have larger orders that you're dealing with. You have multiple large orders at the same time. So it's a little bit harder to keep everything straight and make sure that you have the things you need on hand in order to ship them out. Otherwise, you start getting delays and then you have upset customers and you don't want to deal with that. So it's really important to set up these inventory management systems before you start selling. Fulfillment. If you're dealing with outside suppliers, you need to make sure that they can efficiently do their side of the agreement so that your customers can rely on you. Remember, your retailers have to make a living too, and they're relying on you to get them the product they need to sell in order to make those profits. So having a trustworthy system in place is going to make a huge difference for both you and your retailers. Step 3. Decide on what type of wholesale you're going to offer. There are a lot of different ways you can sell wholesale: pre-orders, immediate delivery, made to order, consignment, and drop shipping. I do speak more about these in part 1, so this is your reminder to go back there and watch that if you haven't watched it yet. Which type or types of wholesale you want to offer depends on a few things. One is which industry you're in. The second is your lead time and how much lead time you need to make your products and ship them out, and whether you want to be paid up front. This is a really important part of setting up your wholesale business because you need to make sure you are setting yourself up for success from the very beginning. As with anything, trust is really important between you and your buyers, and like I mentioned, your retailers are relying on you to make their living as well. So making these decisions ahead of time will help everyone be set up for success in the long run. Step 4, create a line sheet, wholesale catalog, or samples. If you're creating a line sheet or a wholesale catalog or something like that, you're going to want to include basic information like your product images, descriptions, your options that are available for those products, and your wholesale prices. Product images need to be high quality. Think about how when you're online shopping, how important that product image is for you to make your decision as to whether or not to buy it. Then multiply that times 10, because this person is going to be investing a whole lot more into a whole lot more of that product. While it's not out of the question to use a highly stylized photo, it's generally better to use a simple photo with a simple background. One of the most important parts of high quality images is using great lighting. This is somewhere you might want to invest in hiring a photographer to help you with your product photography. This will be a really great investment because lighting and great photos is one of the most important parts of what you're selling. Similarly, the product description is equally as important. This is where you're selling the product. Try to emphasize why it's great, how it's going to help improve your customers' lives, but also remember to include other crucial information like specs and measurements, colors, options, country of origin, things like if it's eco-friendly or recycled, things like that are all selling points that the retailer can use later. You might want to include other information like your recommended retail price, your shipping, other logistics like that, just anything you might want to include that will make the whole process more seamless. So on that note, let's talk about payment in wholesale. Step 5, invoicing and terms. First off, wholesale payments do not typically work like they do in retail. Don't expect to get paid as soon as the wholesale agreement is made. These wholesale transactions generally happen 30, 60, or 90 days after the transfer of the goods. These are your net payment terms that you need to consider before you start selling. Here's how it works. Net 30 means that you will get paid for that wholesale order 30 days after the transfer of goods. Net 60 is 60 days after the transfer of goods, and so on. On that note, you do need to do some due diligence and vet these retailers that you're going to be working with. Since you're not getting paid up front, you're essentially extending a credit to the retailer. From a legal perspective, you are making an unsecured loan to that retailer, so you really need to make sure you trust the people you work with. One thing you can consider if you want to get paid sooner is offering a discount to retailers that are willing to do a net 15 or a shorter time period. This means they would get a discount and you would get paid quicker, so it's really a win-win. Step 6, find retailers. This is usually everyone's favorite part. This is when we figure out how exactly you're going to find those retailers that will want to buy your goods. There are a lot of different options, but let's talk about some of the main ones here. I am going to give you some personal insights because I do have experience dealing in this personally, and I'll give you kind of some of the pros and cons, at least from my perspective, on the different methods. Register with a wholesale marketplace. There are a lot of different wholesale marketplaces, but you definitely want to do your research to make sure it's a good fit for you before you sign up. Here are some tips. Keep an eye out to how well that platform integrates with the platforms you already use. It can be a lot easier if this new platform kind of seamlessly integrates with what you already have, like your website. What rates do they charge as a middleman? They are essentially acting as a middleman, and they're not going to do that for free. So you need to figure out what the price is to use them as a middleman. What commission do they take? Are there any processing fees? Are there any one-time fees that you need to be aware of? Whether it's a flat fee or a percentage of your sales, this is another thing that's being taken out of your profits that you need to take account for in your pricing. Sometimes it's just not worth it because those prices are so high that it drives your prices up and then you're no longer competitive in the market. I used Fair when I was selling my leather goods and I had some success there. So let's use that one as an example just because it's one I've used and I know. It's free to join Fair, but they will charge you a $10 one-time new customer fee when someone finds you on Fair. And this is in addition to the commission that they charge, which I believe is about 15% in most of their categories. Then there's the payment processing fees, which get more expensive the quicker you want to get paid out. Next day payment is 3.5% plus 30 cents, whereas a 60-day payout is 1.9% plus that 30 cents. Here's the formula to figure out your payment amount. You're going to add your order subtotal, which is the cumulative wholesale cost of the items in your order, minus any brand funded promotions. Then you will add that to your shipping reimbursement, which is the cost of your shipping, and you will subtract your commission, which is the order subtotal, times the commission rate for the given order type. Then you'll subtract your payment processing fee, which is the item subtotal times your payment processing fee. So here's an example, and hopefully I got my math right. Let's say your order subtotal is $100 plus $10 shipping. That's $110 minus the 15% commission. So $100 times 15% is $15 minus the processing fee. We're going to use the 60-day payout of 1.9%, which is $1.90 plus the 30 cents, which is $2.20, which brings our total to $92.80. So for each $100, you will lose $7.20 to commissions and processing fees. Also keep in mind that if this is a first-time order with a new customer, you have that one-time $10 fee. So in this case, that first order would actually be $7.20 plus the one-time $10 fee, which makes it $17.20 that they will take from that first order. It might seem like $7 isn't really that much out of 100, but these little amounts do add up, so you do need to take them into consideration because again, this is going to affect the pricing that you set. So pros for wholesale marketplaces. It's easy to reach a lot of retailers in one place without having to travel to a trade show or try to attract traffic to your website. So here are some cons. Because you are using a middleman, you will have to pay higher commissions and fees. So this might end up in you having to increase your prices, and if your industry can't sustain those higher prices, then it might not be worth it. Create a wholesale web page. If you already have a website, which you should, you can easily add a wholesale storefront right to your website, or you can build out a whole separate site just for wholesale. You'll want to make sure it's a password protected page. This is because you don't want people seeing different prices in different places. This one is way cheaper, we don't know why. And you also don't want your retail customers buying at wholesale prices. You want to treat this page or this site like you would your Linesheet. So again, really great product images, really great descriptions. The pros, it's pretty easy to set up. If you already have a website, you can add a password protected page. There's usually no additional fee to add on a web page besides what you're already paying for web hosting, which by the way should already be included in your overhead costs when you set your pricing. There's no extra fees and commissions that have to be paid to a middleman. You don't have to pay for travel to get to a trade show, which is huge because trade shows, like we'll talk about in a second, are really expensive. The cons for a wholesale web page, you do have to drive traffic to your site. This isn't a place where retailers are already going to shop, so they have to find you. This means you have to have really great SEO or you have to advertise. So you have to drive the traffic on your own. On the plus side, if you are already working with retailers or potential retailers, you can drive them to your wholesale webpage and they can place their orders there, which kind of simplifies the process of having orders coming from different places. One more thing to consider, which is neither a pro nor a con, just that orders that come in through your webpage are probably also going to be charged a processing fee, so it's not necessarily free to sell through your webpage. This is usually going to be like a percentage that's taken out, so you just want to check and see what those rates are and see if it makes sense. Trade shows. Trade shows. This is definitely a really great way to network, and networking is very important. However, this is one of the most expensive ways to find retailers. I'm not saying you're not going to find great retailers at trade shows. This is like the traditional way of doing it. I'm just saying it's really expensive and it might not be an option for everyone. There are general trade shows all the way down to really specific niche trade shows. So really it's just a matter of researching what makes sense for the industry that you're in. So right off the bat, one of the huge pros of doing a trade show is all the potential retailers that you can be exposed to. And of course, like I mentioned, all the networking that goes along with that. But let's dive in a little deeper on the cons. Let's look at New York now. This is a huge trade show that happens in Manhattan at the Javits Center. This is one that I have personally done in the past, so I know a little bit more about this one specifically, so we're going to use that one as an example. As you can see, the prices for booths start around $4,000 and go up from there. If you want to upgrade to a corner booth, it'll be an extra $615. If you want to add lighting, displays, chairs, or anything else that they provide, those will also be additional costs. So let's say we're paying $5,000 for a booth with a couple display items. Then you have to travel to the place. If you happen to live in the city, that's great. You're gonna save a lot of money right there. But most of the things that I did, I had to travel for. So you've got plane tickets, you've got hotel rooms, you have transportation, you have rental cars, you have the price to ship your goods there if you can't carry them with you. Gas prices if you're driving. So there are all these additional costs that go along with just that really expensive fee to do the show in the first place. If you're the only one running your business or you have a small staff, you have to take into account that everything that needs to get done in your business either gets scaled way back while you're gone, or it's paused and you're just not doing anything in your business. If you're still working a full-time job in addition to your business, then that is time that you have to take off from work. And that's just the monetary costs. There is a huge amount of emotional labor that goes into doing these shows. It is really hard to spend 2 or 3 whole days smiling at people, making small talk, giving your sales pitch. At the end of the day, it is really tiring. So it's not just the monetary costs that go into this, it's also this emotional labor side of things. One other con is that some of these trade shows are enormous. New York now has something like 1,000+ sellers. So to be found and seen in all of that is incredibly difficult. Now, there is a good chance because there are so many buyers that attend, but just be aware that it's not like you're gonna be like standing out unless you're paying for one of those really expensive featured booths in the front. So people still have to find you. Visit stores. This is one thing I used to do all the time, especially when I was traveling to a new place, a new city. I would get recommendations from people or just start doing some online searching and finding boutiques that looked like they might be a good fit for what I was selling. So this is surprisingly simple, and I actually had some success with this. I would simply walk in and ask. I would do an introduction, introduce myself, what I'm selling, and I would just ask for their email address, and then I could go home and send them the line sheet. In the more common scenario, the owner or buyer was not in, and I would introduce myself to the person behind the counter, explain what I was interested in, and ask for that owner or buyer's email address, and then email them the line sheet later. So either way, you're just kind of asking for an email address, which is pretty unintrusive. It's just an easy way, especially if you are already planning on visiting those shops and looking around or shopping. You're there anyway, you might as well just kind of pop in and just ask. All you can do is ask. Now, whether they would respond to this email with my line sheet, that was kind of a mixed bag. You're not always going to get a response, but people get busy, things fall through the cracks. Be persistent, but don't be annoying, and make sure you follow up. Pros. If you are already exploring, popping into some cute little shops isn't the worst kind of work. So even if you're just doing it anyway, you're on vacation, it's not that big a deal to just kind of walk in and get an email address. Another pro is now you know what the boutique looks like, you know what they're selling, you know from firsthand experience whether it might be a good fit. The cons. It does take some guts to do this. If you're a natural born salesperson, you will have no problem walking in and asking for an email address or giving your sales pitch as to why they should carry your line. But if you're like me, having to sell something to someone can be really intimidating, especially if there's like a lot of people in the store and people are watching you and like can see you trying to do your little sales thing. So you do have to kind of work up the confidence sometimes to do this. But when you actually think about it, it's not that big a deal to just ask someone for an email address, especially it's business related. It's not like a personal thing. On a related note, you can also do this online. So like I was saying, if you're kind of looking online at different stores or you see a competitor selling at a store that you are interested in, or you see someone on Instagram, you can always find their email address pretty easily on either their social media or on their webpage, and then you can just blindly send out an email. Just shoot your shot. And if nothing happens, then nothing happens. You've really lost nothing. Be prepared at craft shows and other events. The last one I want to talk about is being prepared at craft shows and other events. So when you are popped up somewhere, you might get a retail store owner who happens by and sees your work and thinks that it might be a good fit for their store. The first time this happened, I was kind of thrown off. I wasn't expecting it, and I just kind of got their email address and sent them a line sheet later when I was home. The second time I got a little smarter and I brought some line sheets with me so that if anyone asked, I could just hand them a line sheet and get their information and deal with it later. Then after that, I got even smarter and I started bringing order forms. People would show up and want to place orders, so I would just say, here's your order form, here's the line sheet, just let me know what you need. The point is, be prepared at these events for someone to be interested in buying wholesale. Another thing that's happened a few times that I just want you to be aware of is people showing up and wanting to buy wholesale on the spot, but they want to buy the products that you have with you. Now, for me, this kind of depended on a couple things. The first thing was, if it was like the first day of the market and I had a limited amount of something, I really didn't want to be selling those half price at a retail event. I didn't want to run out of inventory. So generally, if it was a first or second day, I would hold off on selling anything wholesale. Now, on the last day, if let's say they show up and they're interested, or they'll come back on the last day, then that's an opportunity to lighten your load and sell some things off before having to pack up from this show and travel home. So this was kind of a rule I made for myself, not to sell those items wholesale on the first few days of a show, and rather have it as an option at the end of the show so that I didn't have to travel with it. It was a nice way to make a little bit of extra money, especially if the show wasn't going that well. Now, our last step, step 7. This is the follow-up. The last thing is to make sure that you are following up with your buyers. And this isn't just when you're trying to make the sale. This is after you've made the sale as well. Ask how the products are doing. Do they need more of any of those products? Do they have any feedback for you? Do they have any custom requests? This shows that you're engaged and also that you care about how they're doing. And another benefit is it keeps you top of mind. So next time they do have to place an order, they will be thinking of you because hopefully they have heard from you at some point recently. Or they had such a great interaction with you that they would love to work with you again. That's the goal. Similarly, be sure to keep your retailers updated. Send out your updated line sheets. Make them aware of any new products or any new pricing. This, again, is going to keep you on the top of their mind. This is all really great to keep them engaged, to make more sales, and to make sure that they are satisfied with working with you. There's a whole lot that goes into this, but it's really not that complicated. The main goal is just to have it all set up and decided before you start selling wholesale. That way you can be prepared for those pain points. You can be prepared with a really great system that is setting everyone up for success. And this is going to be really great for everyone involved. I know I just threw so much information at you, so thanks for sticking with me to the end. I hope you found some good advice here, and I hope you feel like you are more confident about diving into the wholesale side of selling. If you have a topic idea for a future video, be sure to leave it down in the comments. And if you found this video helpful, please consider liking and subscribing. So that's it for now. I will see you in the next one. Bye.